questions before we get started? These are many spine checks. What's going on, everybody? It's your man Quasi here, and I'm here with the Conscious Intersection podcast. Today, we're going to be talking to
Elisa Urtiaga Medina,
who does a number of different things. I don't know what would you say is like your top thing? If someone says, "What do you do?" What would be the first one you'd say?
Yoga, yeah, and community organizing.
Yoga and community organizing.
Yeah.
That resonates. I mean, you met kind of under those kind of guidelines. You know, we're tuning in from Saginaw, Michigan, the house you built. How did you come about building this yoga studio?
I wanted a space for community to gather, and I wanted it to give opportunity to create new vision, have lots of people gather, and work on that like equitable base. So like we have tiered yoga prices, so everyone can join no matter what is in your budget. I just wanted people to get the practice and have continual practice and not have interrupted practice because of life.
Because of life.
Yeah.
I mean, that definitely speaks to me because, I know I was never going to possibly even get into yoga if it wasn't for that. At the time, I was able to go to that donation-based class. There was like this big buff guy that was teaching. And I was like, oh, guys do yoga? Like, I can do yoga, And I don't think I per se paid for it, from a money perspective until much later. But just knowing that I was welcome really made the difference.
Yeah, and when I started yoga, I was 17. So I sometimes had money for yoga and I sometimes didn't. And the first studio I went to in Chicago, I went like 1 or 2, 3 classes with a friend. My friends started going more than me because they could afford it and I couldn't. And I skipped for about 3-4 weeks. And then when I came back, the owner was like, how come we haven't seen you in a while? I was like, well, I don't have money for class all the time. And the owner was pretty much like, well, we can figure other ways that you can contribute. It doesn't have to be dollar-based. Keep coming. So that was a big opportunity for me.
That's awesome. I mean, there's so many different ways like we can exchange our energy. Current like money is definitely one of them, but it's cool that they were able to find different ways to like share because there's so much that people can offer outside of the money.
Yeah, I think like noticing intrinsic value in like sharing a meal, sharing time. Time is valuable, Yeah. And so somebody wants to come help me cut mats for the studio. That's time that was valuable. I can give them a mat for that, So that's how I see. I mean, it's been good times and bad times practicing that for many, many years. I definitely was someone who in my 20s was like living off of $7,000 a year and dumpster diving and you name it. But I learned how to like organize things different so that there are folks who support the time and the energy, especially teachers. Like I want teachers to get paid well, which is not an essential ingredient in every yoga studio. I used to, when I was in Baltimore, I knew a studio that was paying people for 1 hour a week, $15 an hour, and you weren't allowed to teach more than 1 class a week.
Wow.
That was absurd.
Yeah.
Like, how is anybody supposed to live off of that?
Yeah.
So, I think there are many different ways to find people who value what's being shared.
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, you've done that here. I can think of times when I've come in and one of the homies could take class who didn't have much, but they came with some fresh fruit Like, we had a snack. They had enough fruit for everybody. You know, people have like EBT cards. People make jewelry. People have so many other things that they offer. And then money too. Somebody will come through and kind of see the need and support in those ways as well.
Yeah, I mean, like some folks, it's easy for them to come in and pay $100 membership and then take classes freely, you know? And that money goes towards somebody who comes in and has $5 and, you know, then the teacher gets paid $10 per student, kind of. And so, yeah, I think it balances out in the end, but you gotta cultivate everybody giving what they can. Yeah.
Right. Still imploring and encouraging people to do that.
Yeah.
You said the word balance, and I think it's interesting too. Like, how do you know, where? And I know you mentioned Chicago. In your teens, spending some time there. Dumpster diving, like you said. Sometimes having it. Sometimes
well, that
not.
wasn't just Chicago. That was Baltimore.
Baltimore as well?
Yeah. So I grew up in Chicago, southwest side Chicago, close to 55th and Cicero. And then I moved to Baltimore for university and college. And I stayed there quite a while because I had to drop out at one point because of money. And then I got back into school through AmeriCorps volunteer programs. And so yeah, in Baltimore was where I was just like figuring it out. In Chicago, I was figuring it out too, but it looked different. You know, it was like I took the train downtown for school. I remember sometimes not having money for the train to go downtown for high school, so I would just get up and I would walk around the neighborhood and look for change, and I would find some change and then get on the train and get to high school late, but I still got there, so, you know.
Was there ever a time where you were ever really, like, out of luck, or did it always come through somehow, some way?
No, there was some days, and I think I just called the office, and I'm like, hey, I don't have change to get to school today. And the office lady, she was so kind, and she was just like, okay, I'll write that down.
Okay. Yeah.
I went to an art high school. I got scholarship to go there. So I think everybody there was keeping an open, creative mind. So yeah.
And figuring out their way.
Yeah.
That's amazing. When you kind of like move in this way that you've been talking about for years, you know, trusting the universe, and it providing the ways it has, because, you know, you're still here, you know, you've got a space that you're now creating for people to come in and maybe even be supported in ways that, you know, you've covered some roadblocks for some people. You've moved some roadblocks out of the way for some people by, you know, what you've done at this, you know, point. How do you cultivate that sense of like conversation or trust with the universe?
It's always speaking. I think it's subtle. You gotta listen. It shows up in kind, compassionate exchange between people. It shows up in support from a stranger. It shows up in many ways in like those little miracles. And I just feel like when I don't listen is when I feel like I'm hitting my head against the wall, you know? So when I listen, I can say, oh, there's not a door here, but there's a door this way, and it might not look the same, but it's still a door, and that might be the way to go, you know?
There's like a flexibility there, a mental flexibility with, I guess, getting to how you're going.
Yeah, and I think that had to do with, like, when I was growing up, my mom moved 14 times while I was growing up, and my parents were split up. My dad lived in one location, and my mom would constantly move. And then it was the 80s, and they thought it was a good idea if you went back and forth to your parents' separated houses every other day, not on the weekends only.
Yeah.
So I would leave my homework somewhere a lot, and then have to show up the next day and not have any homework because I didn't have it. or I would leave my shoes, or I would leave an object I needed, some clothes. And I think as a kid, at some point, I just had to be like, and I would lose stuff a lot. I had to be like, well, if I lost it, maybe it's useful for somebody else right now. And then if I find it, it's because maybe it's useful for me again. And that was just easier for me to think in my mind than be upset that I didn't have it. You know, I had to shift the way I looked at things.
That's pretty profound in itself. You know, I have a buddy who, you know, we both yoga guys, and we also a little bit of airheads at times. And also we go with the flow as well. You know, and we lose things all the time, and when we lose things or things don't go our way or something of that nature, we always say like, "Hey, it already happened." Like, you know, it already happened. It kind of is like, for all those chaturangas we did, are we ready to do yoga now? You know what I mean? Like, are we able to like find detachment when we've actually detached or like lost something that we wanted at that moment?
Yeah, because sometimes they were like things that had value or memory or something, and I was like, well, they still hold value, and maybe somebody else is getting that value, so I can have compassion that somebody isn't experiencing that joy, which made things like feel like instead of like, you know, wrapped up. Yeah.
Now, you know, you're a yogi, we're yogis. You know, a big part of yoga is this idea of detachment, but we're also humans. How do you find that relationship? Like, what are some things in your life? Feel free to answer however, but what are some things in your life that you can't let go of? You can't do, like the idea of detachment is too, you know, it's like the attachment you have that thing.
I mean, I love my daughter a lot. I waited forever to have a kid because I knew how responsible and ready you should be to be at that point. And I was nervous because of my background to not have all the tools ready to give somebody something fresh and not laden with all the BS that I got sometimes. But I feel like when you meet this person and they show up and they're like just there for you, that was like magical. And I also got to make a connection that I had been wanting since I think I wanted that mother connection for so long. And my mom, she was present and she tried. she was also single momming a lot, but we didn't make that connection when I was young. We have a connection now, and it's, you know, growing and has a lot more patience and peace than it did. But I really wanted that when I was really young, and now I get that opportunity. So that's one attachment that I'm like, yeah, it's not going anywhere. But I think as somebody who has had to shift when things move, sometimes I do practice like, am I ready? Am I ready if I had to let go of that attachment and be grateful for grace of having it just for a small amount of time, you know, for whatever reason. We never know, you know, we never know what's next. So I think sometimes I ponder that inquiry, the yoga inquiry.
I think it's natural for it to come up just from the perspective of we knowing that everything at some point, you know, and I'll gladly go before my son, you know, like I hope I go first, you know what I mean? In that regard, and I know people go through it in the opposite way, which is very tough. And also, you know, to the point, I feel a lot of love. I even feel a lot of love coming from you when you're saying that, you know, and I know when I think about my own child, just to see his face and to be able to, I guess the only way I can think of it right now is to like right certain wrongs. And I know there's nothing, you know, inherently wrong. And it's from a yoga like perspective, I know there's no good or bad, but just from a human perspective, I think when I see him and knowing I can course correct or at least try to, things that I felt were missing. There's a lot of beauty in that, I find, and it's very touching.
Yeah, and also I feel like my daughter's a teacher. You know what I mean? It's like teaching me things that I thought one way, and then my whole consciousness has to shift because something magical is before me, you know?
Yeah.
That's like super humbling. So I think I really like that attachment. Yeah.
Yeah. And she's doing well at the crib right now.
Yeah.
1 year old.
Yeah, she's 15 months.
15 months, cute as a button. and a talker too.
Yeah.
Been talking for like, you said we talked for like 8 months.
Yesterday she was like the itsy bitsy spider went up the water spout. She did the rain. Yeah. She did the sun. And she like, did everything. And I was just like, whoa.
Yeah.
There was so much joy.
I'm sure people seen her for the first time too. Like a lot of elders always say, like, that baby's been here before.
Oh yeah.
They say it makes me think when we were expecting Panther, my son, me and his mom used to own to her belly when he was in there, and like, got some advice from my guy Yoshio. Thanks for that tip, Yoshio, if you ever see this. But yeah, we were owned to the belly, and when Panther came out, I owned to him, and he looked at me like, oh, this was the voice I've been hearing, you know.
Yeah.
And, I'm pretty sure neither one of us had yogi parents, right? Your parents weren't yogis in the traditional sense.
Not in the traditional sense. My dad was very much a lessons guy. Like all the wise things.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think that's why yoga just seemed really natural.
I can dig that because my dad was always a deep thinker, spirituality as well. Yeah. So it wasn't too far off. I guess from the perspective, for the physical part of the yoga, right? In terms of how you diet, how you asana, how you pranayama, how you do that.
But my dad always told me, you are what you make in your mind.
Wow.
So, it's like later on I ended up studying Ayurveda and studying yoga therapy, and like the idea that the disease or the illness or something starts with or how to find healing is actually from shifting mind, and so it's like they gave an example of like first the back hurts and then you go here, then you're trying to save that pain from happening in the back and you get here, and then like you have to like walk a little harder or it gets harder to walk, and then so over time the idea of the pain took seed, and then the whole person is like shifting through that experience. Wow. And so you have to like let go bit by bit to get back to the seed of the idea in the mind of where you started.
That's very interesting. Even in that visual of like coming here protecting this space, it makes me think of like, well, why don't they do a heart opener? But I see now like that thing you're trying to protect, heart openers are about bring a certain level of vulnerability.
Yeah.
I think it's like natural, so to speak, for us to like maybe guard it, but the guarding it is creating more more of a platform for the pain. But to go here for even just a moment, that vulnerability, there can be something new. You can crack open some space that was like once already open.
Yeah.
It's okay. How do you feel that like all that your dad taught you, which is actually, surprisingly very yogic even without the asana, and then your actual asana practice like helped your prenatal experience?
While I was pregnant, I meditated a lot. Like I set up meditation mornings, and people would join me the whole time, and being able to get back to that calm and centered place was like so necessary. And then when Marceline was born, she was the quietest baby. She didn't like to cry. Like, you could tell she would cry to give you like a cue. And then as soon as you picked up on the cue, she'd stop because she didn't want that. She wanted to be like calm. And so I was just like kind of wowed.
Yeah.
I was wowed by that because you could tell as soon as you got the cue, you know, because that's a communication tool. Then it was over. It was like, nah. So I was like, whoa, maybe the meditation was like the physiological experience of co-regulation of the nervous system is huge impact. So that really affected my prenatal journey.
Wow.
Yeah. Especially because I have a certain amount of CPTSD that I manage all the time with yoga. So like.
What's CTPSD?
CPTSD is compound or complex PTSD. So it wasn't one event, one thing. It was multiple things over time that make kind of, a lot more to manage.
Is that something that's common in people?
For folks who've been through some like ongoing traumatic events, yeah, that can be common for people. I think there's a lot more people who experience trauma in their everyday lives than we give space for in society.
Yeah, I agree, and I've heard that there are, in some ways, especially post-COVID, that like almost you could say almost everyone, without diminishing like not an all lives matter thing, but like almost everyone has had some level of when you speak, and you're a community organizer as well.
Yeah.
So I know you're dealing with people in the community who experience trauma, and I know you're also very educated and understand trauma in a very complex way, no pun intended. How do you make that accessible for people? Because for example, when I hear the word trauma, or I bring up the word trauma to a certain sect of people, it can be a trigger. It can be it can be
because trauma is not something you chose. It's the not being able to adjust in a it's like the experience happens, the mind's not ready to digest the experience, and then when you can't metabolize it like
metastasize or something like that.
It just creates that you have to shift your whole perspective instantly in a way that doesn't meet with how you view the world or yourself in it. And so it's like when you eat that piece of food and it just like gets stuck and it gets you sick, the same thing happens with trauma experience in your life. And you can ignore it, but it still sticks around oftentimes in the body in a subconscious manner. So whether it's like a physiological manner, whether it's residual in the mind, whether it's stuck feelings and emotions, it like your body's like, okay, I can deal with this now, so I'll put it here for later when we deal with it, when you're ready to deal with it. That's the way stress response happens. So oftentimes too, it's like Stress is where something happens, but you don't have time to manage that stressor. So you keep going and you like tough it out. And by the time you get back home and it's time to relax, that's when the body says, okay, we're safe. Let's deal with this. And you're like, what? No. So imagine that happens now instead of 6 months. It happens for more than 6 months and then beyond, and sometimes for years. Yeah.
Jeez, I mean, it's heavy to know. I mean, but it's even heavier to feel. And you've answered it in a number of ways, but just like for the the clarity of it, how does one address what they no longer notice when when your trauma response or lack thereof has like made its way to the subconscious, which is not conscious. It's like the opposite of being clear of it. To like, how does one come back to a listening connection? Because I know you mentioned a lot of times the universe is always talking, and if this response or this trauma is constantly ongoing, how does one address what they no longer are aware of?
Well, there are like commonalities that people experience. One of them could be that you'll end up forgetting normal stuff. Because when your mind is in that heightened state of like hypervigilance, you don't have time to remember where you put your keys. You don't have time to remember where, or sometimes you forget to eat. Like things that, under no stress circumstance, it's like, okay, routine day, got the things, doing good. Like if you were to take a test, but you get real stressed out at the test, what happens? You don't remember anything that's on the test. Blank out. Yeah. So like that might start showing up in instances when you're like, hey, why are you here now? That happens to me. Well, that's why I didn't start driving for a long time, because sometimes it will happen. When I was a kid, it would happen. I'd lose things, and then I'd go around the room and I'd look in every little place, and then I'd get back to the place where I started, but I forgot, and I'd go again. And then I'd realize after a couple times, oh wait, I've done this a couple times. Wow. How long have I been here? In this loop. It's like, this is taking 5 minutes, this is taking 10 minutes. That was really like panicky. So there are things that you can do to like get out of that feedback loop. Like you kind of have to just change the sensory experience. Like if some people, you can just go to the bathroom and run your hands under freezing cold water, and like the cold just like wakes you out of it. Or I had a teacher once who said, go outside and be barefoot. Ooh. In the wet and the cold.
That woke me up just thinking about it. It snowed today.
Yeah, I used to do that. I used to just go out in the snow because it would just shake it out, or like get some cold, or for some people it's get active, and for other people it's like chill out and take some deep breaths. So it really is individualized.
It's individualized.
Yeah.
But it's important to like be on the journey to see what works for you, and just to know that there is, if you're experiencing certain, you're trying to go from A to B, but you keep getting sidetracked, there's a potential traumatic response happening there that you may or may not be aware of.
Yeah.
And then thus there might be you can find more of the cure with the awareness.
Yeah, and that you can do it on your own time. You have to begin to negotiate that with yourself, because like your body might say, hey, you're ready to deal with this, but you might not be ready to deal with this. And so there are ways that you can say, actually I'm gonna put this here, it's not gonna go anywhere very far. Or maybe I need to put it far in my mind, you know, like maybe I need to put it in the beach far away, like miles, and bury it in the sand, but I know exactly where it is. So that in my mind I can go back there when I'm ready for that, rather than it taking a toll on me when I'm not ready for that.
Wow. Yeah.
That's like a mind practice that you begin to work on, because especially when you've gotten space from whatever it was, like you get the choice of honoring that space that you have now. You know? And sometimes you're in it still, and you don't have that space where you are, but sometimes it's a journey to find, hey, is there a space where I can be, you know? Like, I think I used to go on walks when I was young for like 3 hours, 5 hours in Chicago, and I didn't know where I was.
These before cell phones, like, or heavy hit, like before Google Maps?
No cell phones. And I would just be like, it's okay, at some point, I will be where I need to be. But just by being able to be in the moment, like, this is a nice tree, this is a nice plant, like, and appreciate all that in that process, eventually I find where I need to go. But that takes time. Like, you have to like give it a little time, even just 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, you know. But it's like, okay, I don't have space at home, but I have space in this park for 10, 20, 30 minutes.
Wow.
And that space can be my space.
Yeah.
And that's where I can be at home. So
you can find yourself in those spaces.
Yeah,
wow,
that's what
powerful.
I used to do when I was in high school, I think. Yeah. And sometimes it would be taking the train or the bus. Was I going somewhere? No. I just needed to be somewhere else. And like for that amount of time, the train or the bus was my space. And I could welcome everybody who came in and like greet them all on their way out.
Huh. Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah. I really came to yoga for the mind, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. The asana came later.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to ask you. I mean, you shared a lot, and I really love. I mean, if I ever was wondering what like home was where the heart is meant,
Yeah.
I feel like I understand it now.
Yeah.
You know.
And that was huge for me. Even just that silly. It seems silly, the phrase, because you hear it so much. But I was like, you know what? I need that phrase, because that means I'm not lost wherever I go. And I don't have to feel like I don't have a place to be. I can be at home here, and then I don't have to worry about where I go to bed at night.
Yeah.
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 So, yeah.
So you shared a lot of your personal, really deeply rooted teachers. You know, you mentioned your daughter. You know, you mentioned your father. You also mentioned the city of Chicago. How
Yeah.
if you were gonna make an all-star lineup, right, of some of the greatest spiritual leaders, teachers of all time, and you know, I'm even thinking of maybe on a supernatural level in the sense of, like who would some of the people be in your
But
all-star
first,
team?
tell me yours again, so I can
get
some examples.
Examples? Okay, I got you. Well, growing up in a Christian background, I think my first introduction to God was in a Christian church.
Mm-hmm.
So if I had to like identify it as a person object thing, I put Jesus in there.
Mm-hmm.
Love how Jesus was about the love and
Mm-hmm.
loving thy neighbor. I found a lot of good in that. Later on in life, I learned about Buddha. I love how Buddha seemed to take it as it came, so to speak. And he came from the highest of the highs, and he seen the lowest of the lows, and he was like, it's all what it is, you know? So I really dug that. I dug Muhammad because I like that Muhammad seemed to take no credit, but just told it. I'm trying to tell you how somebody told me, kind of thing, and the person who told me was Allah. So I really like that approach of sharing the message, and I like Patanjali too, because I feel like Patanjali was, and I don't know if he was necessarily supernatural like these other ones were, but I mean, he seemed to be good at everything, and the Yoga Sutras is clearly like such a deeply rooted part to how we practice yoga, at least in the 21st century. So I would say those, and if I'm gonna leave my last spot open because I'm sure there's gonna be somebody that comes to mind with it. But those are my top right there.
Okay, so I think when I was young, I did get connected to Jesus young, but Jesus was gonna be my older brother.
Yeah, big bro. Yeah, that's how I rock with him.
I wanted an older brother, and that was like, okay, Jesus can be my older brother because he loves everyone. And so I wanted to love everyone. But I got some conflict early on too, because my mom, when they split up, my mom was dating women for a while, and like the church that I went to said that wasn't okay, and I was like, no, it should be okay. You're supposed to love everyone. So I think when I was in high school, freshman, is when I found Buddha, and like specifically through the book Siddhartha.
Me too.
Yeah.
Okay.
And like in the Siddhartha book, the idea of the journey for the search, and it's like, try the things, learn from experience.
Yeah.
That was big. I was like, oh, I can do it too. Like, I can try and have an experience, and then I can know if it is truth, because I tried it. Ooh. So that was huge. And then when I came to yoga and I studied in ashram setting, I was gifted you should get connected to Durga, because Durga is the divine mother, and somebody saw the mother relationship in me needed some support. So they said, okay, you need some divine mother then. If you don't have the mother connection, divine mother's gonna step in. And I was like, what? No. Like, I didn't want this at first because I had created such a angst. And I was like, oh, mother relationship, boo. But I connected with the fierce warrior for justice that is Durga. Ooh. And I was like, okay, I can see this as my teacher. Yeah. And so that brought me then to divine mother and divine love. And then so that is now my biggest mover.
Wow.
Yeah. And knowing that that's fierce. It's fierce to gravitate towards universal compassion. It's like on fire. It will burn. Yeah. And I don't know, that has been a big one for me ever since. And I mean, of course there are so many, and I think Shiva is also a big one for me.
Oh, yeah.
Because Shiva loves all his devotees no matter what or who they are. So you don't have to be perfect. You can be like wild and different and not what people think is right or good, or but you can also be loved, for that, no matter what. It's like that's respected.
Wow.
Yeah, a lot of respect in like, you can be all the things that people say are wrong, but you can still be the utmost follower and on that journey. And also, I love that destruction is not the end. You know?
Destruction is not the end.
Yeah, this idea that Shiva is bringing the ultimate destruction.
Shiva the destroyer.
Yeah, but that's not the end of the journey. There's something next, you know?
Yeah.
And like having space for letting all the things fall apart is like huge. Because once you can sit with all the things falling apart, then the actual thing is ready, you know, for a new. So I think that's a big one for me too.
Huge.
So I don't know. I think that's pretty good for now.
I
mean, there's more. Yeah. But I think that for me now, that's kind of where I am.
That's kind of where it's at.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can dig that. And there was one person I remember, and I realized why I didn't remember them. It was because it was Lao Tzu, and you know the Taoist.
Oh yeah.
The Taoist really.
Now you made me remember. So I am having more and more respect for Vishnu in the form of the medicine bringer. Medicine Buddha was also big for me, and Shiva is the teacher for Buddhist Thai massage and Thai medicine. And so that also has been part of that journey for me.
I would love to see this group of people get together and I don't know if they would share a meal or go bowling or what. They'd party. Yeah. Oh. Jesus bring wine, all of that.
Let me celebrate.
They'd be turning up. This has been a really, really good time. I'm glad you were, as always, really on brand. You know, letting this be a place we could come and have this conversation.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it. Is there anybody that, in the history of the universe, you know, living or have gone on that you would just want to acknowledge or shout out before we get on here on this day to day?
I think every individual who's listening, who's searching, I want to acknowledge that individual because there's the utmost. I feel like that's what I try to do these days is meet people as if God is in front of me. Like, these are the divine ones. We're all here on our own journey. So I want to honor that person who's there. Yeah.
I'm going to close those 3 breaths.
Mm-hmm.